Well, hello everybody. It's good to be back here noon for the daily Devo time. I'm your host Paul Nelson, and I hope you guys are doing well out there in internet land. Um, so obviously we're here for Devos. I don't have well, actually we do have quite a bit to talk about. Hopefully it doesn't take forever as usual. Quick helpful tips for right now as we're in the middle of this quarantine time. You might be binge watching a lot of stuff. That's an obvious, easy thing to do because you can kill tons of time just watching TV. Not a great thing normally. Ooh, Jonathan got some puppy chow. Well, I will either be over to your house or you can bring it over to the church or whatever, and we'll figure something out. But thank you, Tacy. Also, I will need some free samples of that puppy chow. So. Anyways, I'll text Jonathan and let him know, and unless he watches these, and then he'll know from you. But anyways, one of the things that you should be binge watching right now is a thing called The Chosen, and it was back in December when this first came out, and for Jaden, Tacey, and Peyton, we watched the first episode of the season, and basically what you do is uh, download the app and then you can watch the episodes for free. Just look up The Chosen, and it's 8 episodes, about an hour long each, about Jesus, the life of Jesus, and it goes from kind of the beginning of his ministry up to I think the last episode is the woman at the well. So that's about John chapter 4. Not a lot of period of time in his ministry right there. Hopefully, there's more seasons, but I promise you, there are 8 great episodes. Really, really solid, especially towards the end when he starts doing miracles. It's really, really fantastic. So I highly recommend that for you guys to watch that. And again, you don't have a lot going on, and you have time probably to watch a few episodes on your phone or whatever of The Chosen. Also, I just want to remind you, obviously, that this is Passion Week, and we're talking about that a little bit, pushing the coronavirus thing aside and just kind of focusing on Jesus, which, by the way, as Hebrews tells us, to fix our eyes on Him rather than our problems and the issues of this world, and things will grow strangely dim. We won't care about as much the coronavirus and our quarantining and not being able to do a lot of the things we want to because we're just focused on Him. So, so let's just get to the devotional time here because we got a lot of reading to do. First of all, if you look at Christianity.com, which is where I've been getting my timeline stuff, they will say that Wednesday was a nothing burger for Jesus in the sense that there is basically nothing recorded specifically. But I would say au contraire, mon frere, Christianity.com. Because, first of all, I think it's in, let's say Luke. Luke chapter 21. At the bottom of that chapter, in verse 37 and 38, it says, "Every day Jesus went to the temple to teach, and each evening he returned to spend the night on the Mount of Olives. The crowds gathered at the temple early each morning to hear him." So basically, Luke tells us that Jesus, was at the temple every day teaching. And so I don't know why every day wouldn't include Wednesday. So I think it's a pretty easy assumption that while we aren't told specifically maybe what Jesus talked about or did on Wednesday, he was doing something. He wasn't just back in Bethany hanging out. Crowds were waiting for him every day. Can you imagine being taught by Jesus directly? Like not a preacher or a teacher, go between, kind of talking about Jesus, about what he talked about, but actually literally listening to Jesus. And I ask a question as I'm thinking about that. What do you think Jesus was teaching in the temple? And I'm going to read a passage from the Old Testament that I think is clearly just my guess, but a passage I bet Jesus was talking about or reading, or very easily could have done, especially if he's teaching for hours, right? But so we're told that he was in the temple teaching every day and would spend his nights in Bethany. So I'm assuming that Jesus today was back in the temple talking and teaching massive amounts of people. Another thing that probably happened on Wednesday. I'm saying it happened on Wednesday. Christianity.com will say it happened on Tuesday. Uh, chapter 22 of Luke, if you just flip to the next chapter, sorry. It says in verse 1, the festival of unleavened bread, which is also called Passover, was approaching. And when it says approaching, in other gospels, it will say 2 days away. So if Passover is Friday, 2 days before Friday is Wednesday. So I'm just doing the simple math there. And it says the leading priests and teachers of religious law were plotting how to kill Jesus, but they were afraid of the people's reaction. Then Satan entered into Judas Iscariot, who was one of the 12 disciples, and he went to the leading priests and captains of the temple guard to discuss the best way to betray Jesus to them. They were delighted, and they promised to give him money. So he agreed and began looking for an opportunity to betray Jesus so they could arrest him when the crowds weren't around. Real quick, just kind of a crazy thought there, because I think it's the only gospel that says that Satan entered Judas before the Last Supper, because obviously it says that he did that as well when he left the Last Supper. But there was a movie that came out, I don't know how long ago, that sort of suggested that Judas might have been doing his betraying to push Jesus to be the Messiah that he was wanting, rather than to truly betray him. This seems to indicate that is not even remotely close to the reality. Judas definitely was betraying Jesus, and it was not even just Judas, it was Satan himself that was betraying him. Judas probably was open to that Satan indwelling him kind of thing, and it was, it's a very ugly, Judas is a very ugly situation, totally. And just for me, one of the crazy things is that Judas, aka Satan, is the one directly dealing with the priests and the leaders, the religious leaders of Israel, and that they were delighted, it says, to make this deal with the devil. They literally made a deal with the devil to betray Jesus. And not only were they rejecting their Messiah, but they were literally working with the enemy in that scenario. And just to me, it's still very crazy thought that was happening, and that very ugly moments right there on Wednesday where Satan enters Judas. They make that deal to find a day, and it was just the next evening that Judas will betray Jesus to them. So what else happened on Wednesday? Mark chapter 14. I want to read this, and this is sort of, remember how I said yesterday I want you to fall more in love with Jesus? This week, as we focus on him and what he did this last week, and ultimately at the end of the week, what he does for us, should just, our reaction just simply be awe. We're just sitting there. I can't believe this. Jesus is so amazing. Jesus is the best, and I'm totally unworthy of being part of his people, to being one of the chosen, so to speak. And Mark chapter 14 gives us a little bit of a glimpse into what this week, for me anyways, can be for all of us. And starting in verse 1, it says, it was now 2 days before Passover and the festival of unleavened bread. The leading priests and the teachers of religious law were still looking for an opportunity to capture Jesus secretly and kill him. But not during the Passover celebration, they agreed, or the people may riot. Meanwhile, Jesus was in Bethany at the home of Simon, a man who had previously had leprosy. While he was eating, a woman came in with a beautiful alabaster jar of expensive perfume made from essence of nard. She broke open the jar and poured the perfume over his head. Some of those at the table were indignant. Why waste such expensive perfume? They asked. It could have been sold for a year's wages and the money given to the poor. So they scolded her harshly. But Jesus replied, leave her alone. Why criticize her for doing such a good thing to me? You will always have the poor among you, and you can help them whenever you want to, but you will not always have me. She has done what she could, and has anointed my body for burial ahead of time. I tell you the truth, wherever the good news is preached throughout the world, this woman's deed will be remembered and discussed. Just a couple things, couple thoughts on that, on this moment, is that this woman obviously Jesus is having a meal, and she probably doesn't know what's about to happen, but at the same time, she just loves Jesus so much that she is willing to sacrifice, as this passage indicates, that this whatever this was so valuable, this perfume, that it was worth a year's wages. Now, perfume, an average person's in America is like $40,000 a year. I'm sure there's perfumes that cost that, and this woman was willing to sacrifice and this amount of money in this one moment for Jesus. She was just wanting to be in his presence, to give him something. Probably this woman has been very positively impacted by Jesus. We don't know her name, oddly enough. Mark does not tell us that. But we do remember her act, and it's a great illustration for us that there is also a time to just be still and to contemplate how amazing God is. The busyness of life obviously can take control of us, and we can just kind of get distracted, and even distracted with good things like helping the poor, like helping those in need. That Jesus obviously dedicated a lot of his ministry time to doing those things. And that's why maybe the disciples were kind of like, hey, how come this is happening right now? Because there are times away from those, even good things, to take time and just be quiet and just admire Jesus for who he is. And this is that what we're doing kind of this week, the Passion Week is that opportunity for us. Obviously, beyond the coronavirus times, we've celebrated the Passion Week every week for 2,000 years as Christians, as a church. And so this is that opportunity, or one of those opportunities. Every Sunday is kind of one of those opportunities. Once a week, everybody gets together as believers in your church to kind of do that for at least a couple of hours a day, that on Sunday, to just sit back and be in awe of God. And I think of, like, when I worship at church or wherever, listening to worship on my phone, those are smaller moments where you just kind of get lost in the song and you just think about Jesus and how great he is and what he has done for us. And so I want to encourage you guys, obviously, this week to be doing that, to let yourself just kind of rest and think about God. Turn off the TV, turn off the computer, and just be alone with the Lord. Go for a walk. I mean, if your parents are okay with it, go for a walk and just be alone with the Lord, and just in your mind's eye, so to speak, see how great God is and how great Jesus is, and remembering what he did for us this week. And there was another thing in there that I wanted to mention, but it's escaping me at the moment. Oh, the whole fact that he says that she's putting this perfume on him for the burial. That if this is on Wednesday, he's going to die on Friday. That's like 2 days away. The thing about perfume is real perfume, like this expensive stuff, doesn't just go away. Like a lot of like perfumes or body, Axe or whatever, it is made in cheaply. It smells nice at the beginning, but then as you sweat, it just kind of just goes away and dissipates. Real perfume is made of oil, and so it doesn't just leave. It just doesn't just evaporate. It stays with you. And so for me personally, it's kind of a cool thought that I think about, that when Jesus was going through everything that he was going to go through on Thursday night and Friday morning and all the way up to his death on Friday afternoon, he could probably still smell this perfume. And maybe it was a little bit of encouragement to him that whoever this lady was loved him enough to give him this small gift, and gave him some I mean, people say that your memories can be triggered by smells. And so this moment where this woman just worshiped at Jesus' feet was hopefully an encouragement to Jesus as he was getting ripped to shreds physically uh, by his enemies. And I'd like to think that that's what's happening, because it's not even that. I mean, it's just a couple of days, and Jesus makes mention that she's preparing him for his burial, because they would put incense and oils and whatever on dead bodies to make them smell better. But anyways, would be an awesome encouragement to Jesus. I think, I hope for that. So the last thing that I wanted to do, because we're at 15 minutes and I want to keep these a little bit short, but I never do. It's always late. Anyways, what is Jesus teaching in the temples? And again, this is just me personally guessing, coming up with this. Isaiah 53. Now, sometimes this is, I mean, I can't say it's well widely known as this, but apparently in Jewish circles, this is kind of a forbidden passage because it's really specific about what happened to Jesus. In fact, it's one of the best passages, if not the best passage in the entire Bible about the specifics about what happened to Jesus, because in the Gospels, since they were kind of all there and they were Roman people, they knew what a crucifixion was. They didn't need to go into detail about it. So in the Gospels, it just says he was flogged, he was crucified, and we kind of just have to go through history for that. But Isaiah 53 is an account of what will happen to Jesus at crucifixion. And I mean, imagine Jesus teaching a couple of days ahead of time what is going to happen to him by reading or citing Isaiah 53, and then them later on realizing, wow, he said exactly what was going to happen to him days before. And then maybe some of those people were the 3,000 that got saved at Pentecost. So anyways, Isaiah 53 says, "Who has believed our message? To whom has the Lord revealed his powerful arm? My servant grew up in the Lord's presence like a tender green shoot, like a root in dry ground. There was nothing beautiful or majestic about his appearance, nothing to attract us to him. He was despised and rejected, a man of sorrows, acquainted with deepest grief. We turned our backs on him and looked the other way. He was despised, and we did not care. Yet it was our weaknesses he carried. It was our sorrows that weighed him down. And we thought his troubles were a punishment from God, a punishment for his own sins. But he was pierced for our rebellion, crushed for our sins. He was beaten so we could be whole. He was whipped so we could be healed. All of us, like sheep, have strayed away. We have left God's paths to follow our own, yet the Lord laid on him the sins of us all. He was oppressed and treated harshly, yet he never said a word. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter. As a sheep is silent before the shearers, he did not open his mouth. Unjustly condemned, he was led away. No one cared that he died without descendants, that his life was cut short in midstream. But he was struck down for the rebellion of my people. He had done no wrong and had never deceived anyone, but he was buried like a criminal. He was put in a rich man's grave. But it was the Lord's good plan to crush him and cause him grief. Yet when his life is made an offering for sin, he will have many descendants. Let me read that again. Yet when his life is made an offering for sin, he will have many descendants. He will enjoy a long life, and the Lord's good plan will prosper in his hands. When he sees all that is accomplished by his anguish, he will be satisfied. And because of his experience, my righteous servant will make it possible for many to be counted righteous, for he will bear all their sins. I will give him the honors of a victorious soldier, because he exposed himself to death. He was counted among the rebels. He bore the sins of many and interceded for rebels. I would encourage you to go back and read this quietly by yourself and reflect, especially at the beginning where it talks about him being whipped and the physical beatings that he got and stuff. 100% accurate, that passage. One of the things that I want to point out is that it's very clear from Isaiah 53, and then the Jews understand that this is a messianic passage. This is definitely talking about Jesus. Is that he is being punished, taking on the sin of the world as a sacrifice. It is very clear. Even the last line there, where it says, he bore the sins of many and interceded for rebels. See, one of the hangups that typical Jews, religious Jews have about Jesus not being the Messiah is that they don't expect the Messiah to come and say, I'm God, I'm taking on the sin of the world, They just see him as a political guy, that he's like the next David king or whatever that's going to come along and make Israel great again, so to speak. But that is clearly not what the Bible teaches. The Bible teaches, I mean, obviously the Bible teaches that he will be king, but it clearly teaches that he's more than just a king, that he's also a savior, a sacrifice, that sins will be forgiven because of him. And so they reject Jesus because they don't see Isaiah 53. That's why some people call it the forbidden passage for Jews, because they don't, it's so clearly about Jesus and what his purpose is. And you can just imagine that days before it occurs, where this Isaiah 53 passage is fulfilled, Jesus would be talking about it. That it's not just this weird, plan that somebody just came up with. God has been planning this out for hundreds and hundreds of years, even really since the beginning of time. But he put hundreds of years ahead before this in Isaiah 53, so that the Jews and we would recognize what Jesus' purpose was. And to me, that's amazing. It obviously shows that it was God's plan. God is in control, even in the darkest moment in humanity, where Jesus is wrongfully arrested and wrongfully accused of crimes he never committed, and then wrongfully executed. You might say, as the disciples were probably feeling very, very depressed about that, it was all part of God's plan, so that you and I could be righteous, so that our sins could be forgiven. And hopefully one day, and someday they will, the Jewish nation will see that and then receive Jesus as their Messiah. And Isaiah 53 could have very easily, again, this is just my guess, very easily been one of the passages that Jesus was reciting or teaching on to the people in the temple, because it's very directly related to what was happening that week. So with that, once again, I just want you to use this week as an opportunity to fall more in love with Jesus, to kind of put aside some of the stuff that you normally do, even during quarantine, like watching TV and whatnot. I'm not saying you can't watch TV at all. I'm just saying take some time to really just be still with God and just worship him and be in awe of him and be amazed by him. And Isaiah 53 is a great spot to start. I'll definitely be praying for you guys, and I will see you tomorrow at noon for the Daily Devo. We will be talking obviously about what happens on Thursday, because tomorrow is Thursday. And Tacey, I definitely look forward to some of that puppy chow, and I know John is looking forward to it. So thanks, guys, and stay classy, Victor.